segment on Baylor Athletics on Sikkim 365 Radio is brought to you by Richard Carr Buick GMC Cadillac, located at the Imperial Drive exit off Loop 340 in Waco. Proud supporters of all Baylor Athletics.
All right, here we go, 3:33. We've had Nicole Arbach on before, theathletic.com, to discuss a lot of things NCAA, and now there's more states more involved in this name, image, and likeness. And Nicole Auerbach joins us from theathletic.com on Sikkim 365 Radio, Paul Catalina and David Smoke. Nicole, do I hear or do I feel as if Mark Emmert is starting to buckle a little bit or not?
I mean, honestly, I don't think it's that different than it's been, the last few months. I mean, he's certainly changed his tune in general from even as late as 2019 when he was saying, like, NIL was this existential threat to college athletics. He's had to change his tune on this really because he's been forced to.
How much of this, because sometimes you hear the arguments against it, and none of them were really the ones I didn't hear were, well, boosters can just give these kids anything, because that's kind of already going on anyway without name, image, and likeness. But it was more like, well, this will take money away from the university, or this will do this. And none of it made any sense given the fact that, it could be money that was never even coming to the university in the first place. How much of, the NCAA's reticence to this was just a complete misunderstanding of what the real issue was?
Well, I think that some of it is that, and some of that's on purpose, right? I mean, they want to set up this idea that, this is a slippery slope. It'll eventually lead to athletes being employees, and we don't want to get to that point. That's really complicated, employer-employee relationships. But I think that ultimately, they didn't want to be proactive on this, even though there were a lot of administrators and some coaches who I think would have been fine, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, whenever, really kind of diving into this issue and getting out in front of it before, kind of just relying on Congress to ultimately save the day. I just think that, it was this idea of a slippery slope, this idea of, just the fundamental way that the system was set up and put in place was not paying athletes anything beyond a scholarship. So if you think about it, we even had these same conversations about those cost of attendance stipends, which basically filled the gap between what anyone else who got like an academic scholarship was getting for their room and board and what they were getting to go to college and live there. And, people use kind of the same arguments, right? They just didn't like the idea of money being associated with athletes. And so I think some of it's on purpose. And I do think some of it was just this idea that maybe if you continue to fight these things in courts and try to strike down like the O'Bannon lawsuit and the Alston case and things like that, maybe you don't have to get to this point. But I think there were enough people in the world that were smart enough, say 5 years ago, to see where the winds were turning on this. And really, they could have been proactive if they really wanted to. And instead, we're less than 2 months out from July 1st when all these, a handful of these states have laws to take effect to pay athletes on, their endorsements and their sponsorships. And it's really just become a really terrible look, a mess. And really, no matter how this is going to shape up, it's going to be pretty chaotic, even if the NCAA does pass legislation. So it's not just, say, 7 states operating in a world that the other 43 don't.
Yeah, I was going to say, the recruiting advantages, of course, are obvious in that particular case. So in the end, what's the timeline on federal NIL legislation? Is that like around the corner? Is that something that they're going to kick the can as well? You have these states making decisions, and the NCAA, right, Nicole, they're not going to do anything until they have to as far as their own legislation. So which is going to happen?
Well, I think we don't quite know the timeline on the federal bill. Obviously Congress has a lot of other things going on. They still need to figure out which bill or, some sort of, kind of bundling of bills that will kind of get the support, because right now there's a handful of them floating around. So that needs to be determined and then eventually go through the legislative process. That will eventually be the end goal for all of this, because at that point you'll have a federal law. It'll be the same in all 50 states. But right now, we're obviously heading towards July 1st when you have states like Florida and Georgia and all these places, set to take effect. So the NCAA is going to have to pass its version, its NCAA rules, changing this for the other 40-something states because of what you just said, like the recruiting imbalance, just a sense of fairness. So the rules won't be exactly what like the Florida law says, but they'll be close enough that I think everyone will live with whatever minor differences there are, because that would be better than having nothing and a couple of states allowing something that nobody else can. So that's ultimately what's going to happen. That starts with the Division I Council, but the Division I Board of Directors also have to approve it. That just needs to happen basically by the time students enroll back in school in August. So we're in a time crunch, but there's also time to have the meetings that they need to pass that. But federal legislation, I don't know. I mean, I think the goal or the hope for a lot of people right now is maybe, by the end of this calendar year, but there's really no telling. I mean, there's just so many other things that, congressional folks have to deal with that I don't know, if we know exactly, all this money in the NCAA has spent lobbying Congress, ultimately get to the point of, kind of coalescing around a bill and voting for it. But I don't know if, throwing a lot of money and lobbying efforts and visiting folks in D.C. means that, like, the next time they're in session, they'll vote on this day one. We just really don't know how long it's going to take.
Why does the NCAA have to wait for there to be an actual flood to check if they have sandbags? I mean,
they don't. They didn't need to wait, this close until these state laws take effect. I mean, the reason that we're even having this conversation is because California passed its law and proposed its bill, and that kind of got the whole ball rolling here. So, yeah, I mean, they didn't have to be so reactive. They could have been proactive on this, but they weren't. And if you really want to get technical, this all really started with the O'Bannon lawsuit a little over a decade ago. All of this has forced their hands. And, as we know, the NCAA is a very slow-moving entity because it has all of the members and all the schools. This is just how things happen, right? Like, they don't make changes unless they absolutely are forced to.
Nicole Auerbach with us, Sikkim 365 Radio. She's from theathletic.com. Are you getting a kick out of this, Bob Baffert? I know it's serious stuff, but did you hear the story about? So somebody, peed on a haystack or something like that, right? Isn't that right, yes. Nicole? What did he say?
That's what I saw. And then, the horse was exposed to whatever was in that person's system. And I mean, it is just, I was getting a huge kick out of this. I mean, there's nothing really better than like a Monday morning news cycle when you've got, a horse, like alleging that a horse was canceled because of cancel culture. And then, somebody's peeing in the haystack and that impacted, whether or not this horse tested positive for something. I mean, it's just been incredible. I kind of hope Bob Baffert keeps talking about this and that the scandal stretches on.
To be fair, I follow that horse on Twitter, and he's really out there on his political views.
He's nuts. I mean, I didn't realize that
he tweeted out all horses matter. I thought that was unnecessary.
No. I did not realize that Baffert had this stretch of a bunch of positive tests with his horses. I didn't even know that. I guess I wasn't.
Yeah.
He wears sunglasses inside. Yeah. Like, you can't. You got to wonder about a guy.
I have to be honest, though. I don't know about Nicole, how many other sports fans. I watch the Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont, and if somebody wins the first, then I watch the second. That doesn't mean I don't watch it on occasion, but, and we finally had that decades-long stretch broken, so I probably have not been paying attention enough. But this is one of those things that, like, taints him, right, forever?
I mean, it should. Someone who follows this stuff a lot more closer than I did, like, compared it to Lance Armstrong, right?
Yep.
Like, it was, over a period of time, a number of races. But I'm like you. I mean, I only really pay attention for what? It's a cumulative, 6 minutes per year if you watch those 3 races. So I don't really know myself, but, I'm always here for, a sport that I don't follow having a scandal because I just think it's more entertaining that way, which is probably how people feel about college football scandals who don't live in that space. But yeah, I mean, I feel like this is entertaining. It's also really crossing over into the mainstream, which I do think, once Lance Armstrong did, that was kind of the beginning of the end, right? And how people would associate him with doping, right? So I do think it feels like it's shifted because I am with you. I don't really remember this coming into the mainstream in the past when he's had horses test positive.
So your thoughts, one more thing, Nicole, on so Alabama gets a linebacker who's pretty good in the transfer portal. Isn't it supposed to work the other way around where guys are leaving some of the other schools and going to some that need the help? Is it now the rich just getting richer?
Well, it's going to happen both ways. So I feel like this is a good reminder of that because, you are going to have what some coaches have kind of talked about in a very fearful way, which is this idea of, oh, yeah, Alabama's just going to pluck the best players from other rosters. Or, like you could think of like, okay, the best math player of the year could go to, whatever top group of 5 program. And I think obviously in this circumstance, you had a coaching change and you had some other factors, but those will be there every year. So I do think you are going to see it in that direction. I also think you're going to see it the way that you were just referencing, where someone's not getting playing time at a place like Alabama and they do want to go somewhere and they want to start. So I think we're going to see it flow both ways. I think it's going to be probably more high profile in this direction because, you're looking at it, you're like, oh my gosh, Alabama, when will they get a break? Right. Like, I mean, and I think, but in reality, you will have it both ways. You will have impactful players. Like Fresno State was a really good example of that last year. And there will be quarterbacks that go up and down based on playing time. And but I do think, you can't argue that Alabama is not going to benefit from this, or the Georgia is not going to benefit, or, Texas or wherever, because they are. Mm-hmm. And, it's the same as regular recruiting, right? It's the facilities, it's the coaches, it's all of those things. Playing time is the one difference, knowing what you're walking into or not. But I do think, the rich are going to get richer, which is, what some coaches have said. But the group of 5 programs and the FCS programs, they're also going to get richer at some point too. It's really going to go both ways. And I think the ultimate sense of fairness about the movement and not having to sit out overwhelms the concerns that I have about, the top SEC programs getting the best players from other places.
Nicole, thank you very much. We bounced around a little bit more than just name, image, likeness. We appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Have a great week.
Absolutely. Enjoy the next twists and turns of the Baffert.
Yeah, this is crazy. Okay, that's Nicole Auerbach, theathletic.com. Covers college football. Does a great job with name, image, likeness, and other things as well.
We had Bob Baffert at the Super Bowl.
Yes, we did. Listen, the guy's got a bunch of – he's won a ton of derbies and other things. I don't know. Here's always the question I have when you see something like this. It always now, okay, how long has this been going on? Is it true? Okay, the allegations do seem to be, there's a little stretch here now, the last year or so, where he's had a lot of horses test positive. The excuse about a guy having something in his system, peeing on a stack of hay, and then the horse eating the hay, and that by itself makes me want to puke. But, and that's how he got whatever this was in his system, is just crap. I just can't even imagine that. It's so stupid, it makes sense.
To show up in in a horse's system through his digestive tract.
Well, I mean if the horse ate...
Well, what did the guy... My question is, it's gone through your one guy's system and then a horse's system. Like, what did that guy have?
Yeah, no,
he would show up on a horse.
He was loaded. He was loaded. He had to be loaded. It's crazy.
Is it Jose Canseco in 1993?
No, yes. He's loaded. So, and there was a picture... an image of the horse, of whatever it's called.
Medina Spirit.
Medina Spirit. And it's a picture of a horse, and it's a built-up, big old, muscular, massive horse. Because Secretariat's always been the biggest horse ever, just because of its size. But this one had the fake muscles, he's like the, who's the guy in Marvel Comics? The one that the
like the Hulk?
Yeah, him. Not Hulk Hogan.
But the Hulk.
But the Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk. All right. Crazy stuff.